You're listening to episode number 29 of the Indie Film Tribe podcast with me, your host, Angela Matamocha. Welcome. Hi, good people. Hi. Angela Matamocha here of Indie Film Tribe. Thank you so much for joining me again today. Today, we are going to be talking with a super duper producer. She is an awesome lady. She is the principal producer at Morning Person Pictures. She is also an award winning writer, director, and producer, and she is just an all around standout gal. Ladies and gentlemen, Dawn Higginbotham. Welcome.
Hi. You make me sound so good.
You are so good.
I kind of want to take you everywhere I go. So you can just make my introductions everywhere I go.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for being here. You have so much experience that I just know this our listeners are going to really be able to learn a lot from. So this is going to be action packed. So I just want to dive right in.
Sounds good to me.
First thing,
I can tell everybody how not to do everything, how to not make the same mistakes.
perfect. Before we start with not what to do, tell me, what is it that you love being a producer? Why do you love being a writer, director, and producer? What is it?
Oh, it must be all that cash. It must be all that money, that big stacks of money I'm making, because it's just rolling in. Um, Non-facetiously, though, I don't know. There's something about the creative process, and each um, genre has its own pluses. Like being a writer is just wonderful in that you just have all this creative like flow going, and you're alone and you're kind of in it and you're creating these characters and you're just excited about the worlds you're in, and it's just sort of its own thing. And then getting into directing and producing and being on a set and being with other people and all that camaraderie and that energy that comes with being on a film set is just exciting. And I love that collaborating and working with other people and just kind of diving in and being at war together and making something happen. So, I think that, different parts of it come with different pluses, and they also come with, their own challenges too. So,
Absolutely. I'm just curious, when you first sort of dove into this film making journey, where did you start? Did you start writing? Did you start as a director, a producer, or straight out the gate were you wearing all three hats?
I think I started as a writer actually way back when I was in high school. I was writing short stories and probably even before that. And I knew that I always wanted to go into writing in some sort of capacity. But more recently, I started getting into production. I started working in different areas of being on set. So I always had, pretty much every job that there was to do on set. And I just wanted to learn everything and absorb. I'm kind of a sponge that way. I love absorbing the people around me. I like, what are you doing? What does that mean? What's that piece of equipment? What is that for? And I kind of came up through 35 millimeter. So that's where I sort of was born out of, and then had to make the transition into digital. And then I got into post production. So I have a pretty, extensive post production background, and learned a lot about post and editing and getting your film to deliverables and all of that fun stuff. So there's different things that I loved about each one of those elements, but
I just have to ask, and I'm so curious because I think that's so awesome that you've had all this experience in post production. So I would only imagine that this having all that knowledge of post really informs you as a director when you're shooting, yeah?
yes, absolutely. It weighs in on the producing side of things, and it weighs in heavily on the directing, because as a director, you really want to see your vision happen. You want to see it all the way through. And I think you want to have that open dialogue with your editor, and you want to have that open dialogue with your post house, so that the color timing is the palette that you wanted, and the editor is on the same page with you, and is at least, they always say there's three different writers on a set or on a film, and that's the writer, the director, and the editor. So your story is going to change with each person that gets their hands on it. So I think it's really important to continue those dialogues. I think it's important for the writer to be talking with the director when possible. I know that's not always possible, but it's good that they're communicating and on the same page, unless they're just taking it a completely different way. And then I think the director needs to be communicating with the editor and making sure that it's the same vision and continuing that same idea throughout as best as possible. I know one of the questions was, where did I start? I started as a writer, and then after working so many years in production, I finally started producing my own films, which was exciting because then I actually got to pull it all together and see it all go from development all the way through to the end to distribution, and that was really cool. And then about 2 years ago, I started directing, which was really scary because I thought, I don't really have any interest in directing right now, but I do have stories that I have ideas for, and maybe one of these days down the road. And I kind of started with this short film, and it started as this little idea, and it grew into this big thing. And I don't know, I really felt like the need to dive in there, and I had a really specific vision for it, and I had a really specific story that I wanted to tell, and specific people I wanted to work with. So I think that's what excited me about going into directing. But it has to be something that I really visualize and really can wrap my head around. I wouldn't do that just to do it. I would really have to see something there that I connected with.
Now, are you talking about The Usual?
I am.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about this. For those people that are listening, that is I think that's first how I became familiar with your work. I believe that's the first thing I saw was The Usual. And this film ended up going to the Cannes International Film Festival. What was your experience at Cannes like?
Oh, it was exciting. I remember getting the call saying that I was going to be an official selection at Cannes, and I didn't know what to think. I was like, wait a minute, what? Is that something that's happening here? Is it affiliated with Cannes? And it's kind of a thing that's happening and they were like, no, you're going to Paris, or I'm not Paris, you're going to France. And so it was really shock and awe. And I was working in post-production when I found out. I was doing my day job while I was producing and directing and writing this film. And so I was at my day job at a post house, and I was sitting there, and it's dead quiet. I'm trying not to scream, and I'm just kind of on the phone going, "What? Wait a minute, what?" So it was a very exciting experience. And then going to Cannes itself was off the hook. I mean, nothing can prepare you for how crazy it is. It is just. You just sort of hit the ground running, and I think we slept like maybe an hour a night while we were there. And luckily I went with a big group of people, and I think it does help if you go to these type of festivals, these big market festivals like Cannes or TIFF or Italy or any of these ones. I think it really does help because you have a support group, you have people to lean on, you have it's not just you by yourself trying to feel your way through everything. And I've seen people try to navigate it alone, and it's really scary, and it's really isolating, and it's hard to network that way. It's hard to make meetings that way. We also set up a lot of meetings beforehand. We set up a lot of meetings with sales and with distributors before we even went to Cannes. So it was really helpful to have that lined up before getting there and not feeling like I was wailing around trying to just trying to talk to people. Because once you're there, your head's just sort of you know,
This
you're
is
dealing with jet
very
lag, and you're dealing with like trying to meet everybody.
This is very interesting that you said that you set up meetings beforehand with distributors. In my mind, I think I'm thinking, and probably some of our listeners too, like with a short film, is this something that you can actually do? And it sounds like you did. You had meetings
Hmm.
with distributors. What did
Oh yeah.
that look like? Like, where you have a short film where it's not, a typical feature that you go into distributors and sales with a short. What was that? That's so interesting to me.
It's a little trickier because, yeah,
Yeah.
you're not going to sell a film. You're not really necessarily going to sell, but it was more about meeting with the distributors about financing the next project, about, getting involved with the next film and, using the, the accolades of the usual to work on getting the next project set up. So that was what it was more about than necessarily trying to sell anything. Or most companies would have their film in the market itself, and mine was at the market. It was played at what do they call it, there's a name for it. Anyway, it's part of the market, and they show short films at that part of it. um, but it wasn't there to necessarily sell. Although we did end up selling the film. We sold to Indieflix and to Short HD TV, so that was kind of cool. It's really interesting selling a short film. I never knew that there was a venue for that. I was
Right?
like, who's gonna buy into watching short films? But there's actually quite an audience for that. I think that sometimes financiers go on there and they look for content and they look for ideas, they look for filmmakers. So it's good to be out there in any sort of regard that you can be. I mean, festivals are obviously a really cheap way to go and really good way to go. But it's great if you can get some momentum going and then get picked up by a distributor, even as a short film.
That's awesome to hear. I think that's really inspiring and really terrific to hear. For people that are listening, I have done several interviews with people that talk about how difficult it is to get into some of these top tier festivals, and how, in order to do so, it's about relationships. You have to know someone, you have to be able to, you don't just submit the regular way on Without a Box or Film Freeway. What was your experience like? Did you find that to be true for you?
Yes and no. I think, I don't want to get into the politics of it because I
Yeah.
do think that's involved. But
Yes.
I don't always think that it's necessarily about, oh, I didn't know somebody at the festival. Sometimes it has more to do with the festival has a certain genre that year. So let's say the festival's theme that year is about saving the planet or Earth or something. So you'll notice that a lot of the films fit a certain genre or a certain theme. And I've found that to happen a lot, where maybe the film didn't fit in with, they have, my film takes place in 1930, so it's a very specific period piece. It's not about, saving the planet, it's about saving people. And I think that it didn't always fit into, like, there was a lot of genres where they had like a theme of sci-fi and future, and there was a theme of, so it was a little bit difficult to fit into certain pockets like that. Other times I did feel like that if we had known somebody, we might have had a better foot in at different festivals. But we got into, like, I mean, the whole Cannes thing. I didn't know anybody at Cannes.
Wow.
And that just happened because I reached out. I did research, as much as I could. I looked at Without a Box. I went online. I found out who the director was of the festival. I not only submitted through Without a Box and places like Film Freeway and that type of thing. I also tried to find emails for either the director of the festival or the acquisitions person for the festival, and I tried to submit directly to those people so that at least they're hearing my voice and they're not just getting some blind film. Because I think what happens a lot of times, and understandably so, they're getting thousands of submissions and they don't have it's not like they have a big budget at some of these festivals, and they have a lot of people, a lot of staff looking at these, but they can only look at so many films, and maybe they look at the first 10 minutes or the first few minutes of it, depending on how big your film is. Sometimes that does kind of feed into the whole situation. So I like to be as personal and as direct with trying to find out who's running that particular festival and submit directly to them, so that it's not, it doesn't feel like I'm just blindly throwing stuff to the wind. Especially, I said that it's inexpensive, but it really isn't. If you think about how much money it is to submit to a film festival, you're talking hundreds of dollars in some respects. So, if you're going to spend that kind of money, you've got to make an impact. You have to have a kick-ass EPK. You've got to have some good marketing behind you. I think in some respects, like probably, I don't know if I should name any festival name. I won't name any names, but some of the bigger festivals, let's say top 5, and I think we all know who those are.
Yeah.
I think you almost have to already have your sales in place before you even go to the festival, because I think you have to have those marketing dollars. You have to have those P&A dollars behind you before you even go to the festival, so that you're going to get really pushed in the festival. And it is a more inexpensive way of going through that route, is a more inexpensive way of marketing and getting word of mouth out, and how the accolades and the more awards you win, the better your film looks. And now all of a sudden you've got all this interest growing and more people want to go and see it, and it's doing better at the box office. But you hear all the time, like, this studio acquired this film, they do a big announcement like they acquired it at the festival, but they actually acquired it beforehand. And then you find out that they were kind of behind the marketing of it and everything, which is a really smart way to do it. But, it's just a matter of if you get that opportunity to get that kind of Big Six studio representation behind you before you have to go through the festival circuit. Otherwise, you're kind of navigating it on your own.
It does make me wonder about the independent filmmaker, the real, someone that maybe has a, $80,000, $90,000 film that maybe doesn't have a sales rep or distribution and is trying the film festival route. I feel like, what sort of chances does someone like that have if they don't have all these relationships, with a sales agent, with someone at the festival? Is it even worth submitting?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. I think it is, because you just don't know.
That's true.
And it is, as much as it is so important to just really have solid material. It comes down to how good your film is, really. But you can have a not so great film really make the rounds and get out there because it has a name attached to it, and it has some marketability attached to it, and it has this studio attached to it, or it has any number of those things. Even without the studio, you get a recognizable A-list or fan-based talent. You're going to get people to come and see it, and it's going to be attractive to that festival because they know people are going to come to the festival. So it makes sense. They want to draw a crowd. They want to get people in. They want to get attention.
They're a business as well.
Yeah, they're a business as well. So they gotta make their money, and they have to keep their festival going, and they have to market their festival. So that's the easiest way for them to do that. But you hear all the time about these little nothing films with no actor, actors, but not a big name attached. And they are, they go into this festival and they're like the sleeper hit of the year, and they start winning all the awards. And so you just don't know. It's really, I think you just have to go for it. I think you have to try and get seen however you can get seen. And I think festivals are a really great way to do that. And you can try to go through the sales side of things and the sales agent side of things before you hit the festival circuit. But I think you almost have to you have to try the festival circuit first, because then you can start like getting people coming after you, and you're not. It's a bidding war of people interested in your film instead of vice versa, where you're going out and begging people to come on board, and they're not making the best deals and that type of thing, which is a whole other story. That's a whole other, yeah, that's a whole other bit of information.
Well, no, thank you for that because I just think, the fact that you were able to get, and this is your first project, that you got your first project, correct?
Yeah,
Into
yeah.
Cannes Film Festival. I mean, that's huge.
Luck has a lot to do with it too.
And
Yeah.
also a really freaking kick-ass film. I saw it a few times, so poo on
Oh,
you
thank
for
you.
that.
Thank you.
All right, so let's switch gears. What is it that you are super excited about right now, project-wise, that you are working on?
I've got a couple of things where we're actually talking about transforming the usual into a TV series, kind of like a Downton Abbey kind of thing, which would be a lot of fun. So talking to a few people about
Yes.
that. I know it's so funny. They tell you not to shift genres, but sometimes that happens.
Hmm.
But I've got a couple of psychological thrillers that I'm working on. One of them has some partial financing. The other one's in development, but is getting there. And I'm working with a producing partner on three different projects, and two of them are really big sci-fi projects. So I'm not real, we'll see how quickly that takes off, but they're a bit bigger, big budgets, which is, new territory. I'm used to working in big budget in post, on the post side of things, or visual
Uh-huh.
effects. So as a writer director in the big budget area, it's interesting. I mean, it's the same thing. You're making the same movie. It's just now you have visual effects, and now you have a lot more, people on set, and a lot more help, which is also really good.
You
Um,
said something that I want to kind of zero in on. You said on one of your projects you have partial financing.
yeah.
What is partial financing? I know it's you don't have all the financing, but what did that look like for you in just attaining that financing? Because this is a bigger budget now that we're talking about,
Yeah.
right? This is
Yeah, we
millions, right?
have. Well, we have two. We have a smaller thriller slash horror film, which is kind of a psychological thing, and each one of them, that one is more like about. It's just under $1 million.
Okay.
So it's still in the lower budget range.
The indie,
The other
yeah.
one's a big sci-fi, extravaganza, and that's more in the $80 million range. And so we have about 20% of the under a million lockdown. So that's good because, well, I'll go into that part in a second, but and then the same sort of for the sci-fi one, we have like 10% of the budget locked. And the reason why that is good for us is because that's the money that we use to go after talent. And talent is what's going to get you the rest of your money. So what we are doing with so we have kind of a formula where we go after 20% of the budget, or that's where we start.
And is this
Sometimes
with the $80 million film or the $1 million film?
this is with the $1 million film, and
Okay.
this is our sort of our plan to do with our other projects. So basically, and it doesn't have to be this way. I mean, you can have a certain percentage, or you could have, some people want to come in for the full enchilada. Like we started. There's one film that we want to do that's under 500,000. It's really low budget, and what we started with was I had 100,000 locked in for it, and it was like a $350,000 film. So we were going to start with that. But what I was finding is when I went after investors, they were like, "No, we don't want any other investors. We just want to come in for the full 300. Can you get rid of that person?" So, which is great. I mean, come on, that's like the best thing you could ever hear. So sometimes that happens, and sometimes they just want to. When it's a smaller amount like that, they may want to be the only person that's involved. Where it's a larger amount, with the horror film, the Dead River one that I'm working on, we went after the 20% first, and then we were using that to go after additional investors, after sales, and after actors. And what we're doing right now is we're out to actors. We have offers out to them. Then we have, once, we're also talking to different sales. We have a bunch of different salespeople that we work with, or that we communicate with. We don't work with them. We talk to them when we say, okay, here's kind of our 5-person list for each big role that we have, or each cameo that we have that we want to get a name in for. And here's approximately, what we think the rate is going to be and how much we're talking. And here's our budget. And the sales team will come back and say, okay, the value for this would be about this, and here's what we think your film is going to project. And they give you, sometimes you can get a rough projection from the sales company. And with that, you can, and again, this doesn't always work, so I can't say that this is like the way to do it full stop, but then you can either go to additional investors, and say, I've got 20%, I've got a sales company that's interested, I've got this actor looking at it, they feel like the projections could be along the lines of this. It might be a comparison to another film that's similar. This film was done for this budget. It made yada, yada, yada at the box office opening weekend. This is what it grossed domestically. Here's what it did internationally. So between all those numbers, you come up with a projection. You can show the investor, the additional investor, this is your potential of making money. Or you can go to a gap loan.
Which loan?
You can go to like a lender or a bank, there's several banks here in LA that do it. There's international banks that do film financing specifically, but they will have requirements for you. It has to be over a certain budget. It has to be over a certain number. It has to have either an A-list talent or a sales team that they already do business with. A lot of times they want to know that sales company. They don't want you coming back with, well, I just got, Happy Day sales company on board, and they're like, I don't know who that is. I don't want to. Yeah. So what if they said that we're gonna get involved and that we like it, and if they are happy with the situation and the sales company is happy with the situation, then a lot of times you can kind of get everybody talking and work something out. Sales companies don't really do minimum guarantees as much anymore, which makes it really tricky. But sometimes you can discuss things like pre-sales, where, okay, let's put this package together. Let's get this actor attached. Let's get this, little bit of money attached, whatever percentage that is. Let's say 20%. And then let's go to Cannes, and let's go to a Berlin Film Festival and TIFF, and let's talk to the buyers, and let's see how much this is going to sell in these territories. And what you can do is sell off your territories, which means that if you're doing this from the beginning, you're getting your financing. However, it's tricky because you're not getting the financing until after you've really started production, because they're off selling the territories. The money has to, there's a lot of like eggshell game going on. So
yeah,
the money
it sounds
isn't
like
coming
it
in until you're already in production. So you're getting a gap loan against what they project that they're going to sell the territories for. It's a bit of a shell game, and you really just have to just go in, dive in, and just start talking to people and seeing what they're willing to do. I don't know that all sales companies are willing to do pre-sale offers. It really depends on the project, who's attached, who's involved. But sometimes you can finagle that, and then against the pre-sale, you can get a gap loan that will cover you through production until you can get the money in place and then pay off the gap loan. And then a lot of times that's cheaper to do than getting an investor, because you get an investor on board, and right out the gate you're paying, their money back and probably 20% return on investment at least, depending on what their deal is. And then after the fact, you're splitting the pie with the investor. Now, for a gap loan situation, if you can get a lender, if you can get a bank, What you're looking at is more of, okay, here's our percentage
Real
on
quick,
the loan.
let me just pause you real quick, because this is really good stuff, and I just want to make sure that our listeners are understanding. So, just to sort of step back, maybe 2 steps, you go to a film market, right? This is one of the ideas that you're proposing, that you're trying to see. You go to a film market with your package, with the actors that are going to be attached, maybe 20% of the budget already, and you talk to the buyers. And the buyers say, yes, let's say, we are interested in this, and we are going to sell it to these territories. And part of that deal is they will then buy the film from you once it's done. But what you're saying is, you, the producer, are not going to get that money until you're actually in production. So then you go to the bank to get this gap loan, and this gap loan is what's going to cover you during production.
Right.
So you can then go back to the buyer and say, okay, now we're in production, give us our money. Is that right?
That's pretty much it. That's pretty much the gist of it.
I just wanted to break it down.
I know. I'm trying, like, I tend to like splinter off into different things, because one thing takes hold and starts going off.
No, this is great though. That's great though, because just for people that are listening, just so we can sort of paint a picture of, like, okay, this is one way people are doing it.
Yeah. And I think and I don't want to say don't take this as salt, because it always works differently. It depends on the situation, it depends on the film, it depends on the actors attached, it depends on the sales company. So it really depends on the situation and what is being negotiated and talked about. The other thing that everybody should keep in mind is, when you're dealing with a bank loan or a lender type of situation, there are requirements. It has to be over a certain budget, which I mentioned earlier. But and they have
What is that budget, if you don't mind me asking, from your experience so far?
It's different for each bank, so you're going to have a different situation depending on who you're dealing with. And not every bank does this. Like, you can't go into Bank of America and say, I would like a loan to make a movie. You're probably going to be better off going to, like, Pacific Mercantile or Commerce, or there's a bunch of East West. I think there's a bunch of them that do it, but it's going to be a different situation depending on the bank. So I can't
then again, you go to the bank with maybe like a note from those buyers saying, yes, once this film is complete, we are going to buy this film. So that's proof. So then the bank knows, I know this buyer. Is that kind of the? It
doesn't even have to be from the buyer necessarily, because your sales agent or your sales rep or your sales entity, mini major or major distributor or whatever, is going to probably give you like a projection number of what they think they're going to sell all the territories for. And then you can go back to the bank and say, okay, depending on what you have, because they're probably not going to sign anything before you guys start making deals. So you can say, if you're already talking to the bank before you have a contract with the sales agent, you can say, we're in talks with, or we're speaking with these guys and they're interested. Would you be willing to work with, this mini major, or would you be willing to work with this big six studio? Of course, they're going to say yes to that. Or would you be willing to work with, this company? They're not as well known, but maybe you've already dealt with them and they've got a good reputation. It really comes down to, did it work the last time they dealt with that company, and did they have a good experience with them? The other thing is, a lot of times they will request that you have a bondable line producer. So they'll want you to have, or bondable, your film needs to be bonded. So, so you're going to want to make sure that that is figured out with your line producer. And you should probably, if you're like me, you're kind of the line producer a lot of times on these really low budget ones, because you can't afford to go hire a line producer and have, all these other people that you need for the crew. So a lot of times I end up doing the budget, doing the, scheduling, working with, a lot of things that normally, breaking down the script. A lot of times the line producer would handle a lot of that. So But it is a good idea to have a separate person come in, and a professional line producer come in and do this. And especially if you can get, somebody who's bonded, it's going to help you a lot when you're putting your financing, or your whether you're going for a gap loan, whatever it ends up being. And the gap loan kind of works in financing too. Let's say you have an investor who's in at 20%, and you just need to finish the film, or you need to find a way to finish whatever, or you have a producer or a investor who comes in for 50% of the film, or another percentage of the film, and you just need to finish whatever that is going to be. You can always go to one of these institutions and talk to them about, okay, I need a loan. I need a loan to get me through, here's what it's going to cost to finish the film through post-production and everything. And this is what I need. And here's who's attached. And we've got this actor, or we've got this situation. And, and I'm sure they would at least be open to negotiating. And you have to be really careful when you're dealing with financiers, lenders, especially lenders, salespeople. And I'm not talking about legitimate banks and legitimate, like, already established, although, I'm sure corporations have this issue as well. But I have seen in my past dealings where somebody has gotten a really ridiculous loan on something, where they owe 100% interest. You have got to be careful. You cannot just make the film to make the film. You have to understand, and that's one of the reasons why when you look at a proposal is really important. Prospectus, pitch deck, or whatever it is you're putting together for investors. One of the first things you say in a proposal is a disclaimer that films do not inherently make money. And it sucks to have to say that, but if you look at, you could have the best film ever made, but, opening box office may not be what you think, or you may not even get a theatrical. You don't know what is going to happen to your film. They have films on Netflix, they have films on Amazon that went straight to Netflix, went straight to Amazon, went straight to DVD, went straight to Blu-ray, whatever it is. So you don't really know exactly what's going to happen with your film. And without having box office, you don't know where that money's going. A lot of times it's really hard to track money. You're not part of the sales team. So you really, it's hard for you to really, really honestly say factually to your lender or to your investor that 100% you're going to get your money back plus this 20% interest. We have to sell it. We have to encourage them to put the money in. So you have to make it as enticing as possible, and you have to find a way to track the money as best as you can. But you have to be really careful in making deals with people that want something that is just not realistic. And that is where you're talking to people that say, all right, I'm going to give you this money, but I want, anybody who asks for over 20% interest, I would be investigating. I would be checking it out. I would be researching. I'd be finding out what their success rate is. I'd be finding out, what have they been involved with in the past. As much as they're researching you and they're, interrogating you to see how good you're going to be and how much money you're going to make them, you have to be a suspect about them. You have to be careful about the money you're bringing in, because, you don't want to get yourself in a situation where you're losing your house now, or you're losing or you're losing something because you owe now this loan that you can't pay back.
Right. And when I hear you talk about this, I automatically think, because I feel like more and more these days, films are actually not getting theatrical releases, right?
Yeah.
I feel like in the past, maybe 5 years even, with the Netflix, with the Hulus, with the Amazons, with all this online streaming, I feel like it's just like the big tent poles and the comedy and the child's film, those are the ones that are getting theatrical. Like all the rest,
but it's not necessarily a bad thing, because, that's where we're getting a lot of our our content now is on our phones and on our
Yes.
tablets and on our
Yes.
TVs.
So I
And
guess my question is, what does the return look like getting a theatrical release versus just an online release, just the
it's tricky.
VOD, right?
It's tricky. Yeah. I mean, I still think that, you know, I think that there's a good chance, depending on your content, that you're going to, I mean, God, Netflix and Amazon have more money than any of the distributors and financiers out there. So, I mean, they're spending big bucks and they're getting big names. You notice every day, like and Amazon really does a big push for theatrical, even, not just,
For new content, all
right.
new.
And Netflix
Yes.
gets behind their content. And so, in a way, they're a really good way to go. And I think there is still a viable way to make money for your investors. And I do think you can be successful in that. I think you can also, a good thing to maybe look into is a producer's rep or a sales agent that you've already worked with in the past that you trust, that can lead you to the right distributor or lead you to the right sales situation. Because, it really comes down to trusting, and there's so many that aren't trustworthy. I don't want to talk too much about that, but you want to make sure that you can fully put your trust in these people, and as best as possible. And sometimes it's out of their hands. If they're going to sell foreign territories, I mean, it's hard to keep track of. You sell a territory and that's it. That's the money that comes in. You're not going to keep seeing probably more and more money coming in from those territories once you've sold it. So it's like, okay, well, here's what we made, and you expected to make this, and they come back and they're like, well, we made this from, this country, and we made this from this territory, and we made, so, you have to just hope that once you make the choice of who you're going with, that they're being honest on their quarterly statements, and that they're really, telling you what's coming in.
How important are selling to these foreign territories for the ultimate ROI? Is that a big part of it?
I think it's becoming less and less important.
Really?
I think, well, I mean, from what I'm hearing, I don't know for sure, because I'm not a sales rep. I'm not
right.
I'm not that person, but from what I'm hearing, international sales are not as important as domestic currently.
Interesting.
They really want something that they can really get people in the theaters here in the U.S. They want something theatrical and big that's going to get people in the theaters domestically. And that may be that they're trying to catch up to other box offices, because the U.S. used to be number one box office-wise. I think that's kind of fallen over the last couple of years. Maybe we're neck and neck with China. But I think that maybe they're trying to build up domestic. I mean, international, if you get a big international name, there's certain names that are automatically just going to. A friend of mine just did a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, and they knew, okay, that's gonna,
he's still making
all
movies.
Over the place. Yeah,
I didn't even know he was still making movies.
And he still looks good. He still looks really good.
And the Europeans love him, right?
Yeah, so that's gonna sell. That's gonna do well in certain territories. Comedy is next to impossible to sell. It just doesn't sell internationally. So so you have to be careful about your genre. So if you're going into this solely because you think your film's going to do big internationally, then you really need to stick to thrillers. They love thrillers. Horror is kind of teetering a little bit, so you really kind of want to go the thriller route. Comedy just does not sell internationally. You can do, I think romantic comedy or kids comedy, like Family does well, I believe.
Yes.
But just straight up comedy, unless you just have the biggest name in comedy attached to it, it's going to be a tough sell.
And are dramas tough to sell internationally as well?
Dramas are easier than comedy, believe it or not. I think it's just because not all comedy translates in different territories. Whereas drama, you can kind of get the gist of what's going on. But comedy has always been, I think, a really tough sell, foreign. So it's something to keep in mind also is what your genre is going to be. I wouldn't let that make you run away from your film. So if you have a comedy, I wouldn't not do it because of that particular, you just may have a little bit harder time selling it, depending on who's involved in it.
So let's say for the filmmakers that are listening to this, we are Indie Film Tribe, so the majority of our listeners are in the independent film world. My question to you is, and of course, when I say independent film world, that can mean a $50 movie. It can also mean a $20 million movie. That's still indie.
I made both.
That's still indie, right?
Yeah.
So for those indie filmmakers that want to step out of the ultra low SAG budget, I think it's $150,000, that want to move beyond, what do you think, in your experience, in your opinion, is the next important person that someone like me needs to connect with? Who do I need to know to help me move to that next level?
A-list actors.
Aha.
I really think it comes down to content and who your talent is going to be.
Wow.
Because I think that if you are, I really think it comes down to having something really, really good, really solid material, and if you have a really solid script, you're going to get that really solid actor, and then you can go after really solid money. I think that,
love that. Really solid script, really solid actor, then really solid money.
Yes. Yeah. And I do know that it is really hard, the whole getting the actor attached. Trust me, I've run into this. I just asked this to other producers that, are a little bit further along than I am, and there's such this chicken and egg game that comes with dealing with agents and managers and trying to get the talent. And it is incredibly, incredibly frustrating because you can't even get to the talent without having money. And you can't get the money without having the talent. So what do you do? So one way that we've gotten around it is going through friends of friends of friends who know that person somehow. There's always going to be somebody who's got a connection, or that actor has their own production company, or that actor has a lawyer or a manager instead of going through the agent, because the agent has got to be about the bottom dollar. And actors, maybe aren't making as much as they used to because we are doing so many of these independent, low-budget indie films. They have to make sure that you're not really like one of the big six studios coming after them, pretending to be a little guy saying, I've only got this amount of money, we want your guy to do this for nothing. They really have to legitimately know that you really are a super indie film trying to get this person on board. And it's really hard, it's really difficult to up your game and do a larger move into that bigger budget realm without having the talent there, because that's who is going to make that film viable and make it make sense for doing it for that much money. Even if you're doing a $50 million low budget film that's maybe a visual effects driven film, if you don't have any actors in it that people recognize or connect with, it's not going to sell, and you're going to end up spending $50 million on a film. And it sucks to say that, because I know it doesn't matter.
Wait, are you saying $50 million for a low budget film?
Well, I should say that's more mid-range, right? It's a really low budget. But 10 million. Let's say 10 million. Because we have a film that we're working on that's a family-driven film that was something that we were working on with a couple of companies in China, actually. And that had a little bit of money attached. But it's so hard because, you have actors that you really, really want for it. And you got to get somebody, you got to get at least one name, even if they just walk across the room for 10 seconds of the film. You get them in for one day, you pay their big rate, and then you get rid of them. And I want to work with actors because I want to work with them. I'm a director, I'm a writer. I want to hear my words spoken by people that I connect with, whether that's an A-list actor or fresh off the street, actor who's just amazing. And I mean, they did it. Look at look at Moonlight. I mean, there's not a lot of big names in Moonlight, but it's a beautiful film, and
Just
it won
Brad
all the
Pitt.
awards. But they won all the awards, and they won all the things and the stuff, and the lead characters are not like,
Yeah.
A-list actors. So it happens. It's a miracle when it does, but you really have to get like a Brad Pitt behind it. You have to get somebody to either, and that's, okay. So that's another really good point. Uh, Film, you're used to doing $150,000, $300,000 movies, and you want to up your game, and you want to get an actor, or you want to get more money, or you want to try to find the right financing. Talk outside the box to actors who want to produce. They may not be able to be in the movie. They may not be able to give you their time as an actor because they either can't give up their rate, or they don't have the time, but they may want to get more films under their production shingle, and so they may want something that is along the genre that you're doing, or they may want to, work with up-and-comers and help them develop content. They may see something really special in your script, but a lot of times these guys don't even get requests. They don't even get people reaching out to them, which is, and then you hear years later, well, if people never contacted me, so we just did our own thing. So I feel like at this point, it's the time to really just kind of take all the chances. And,
Yes.
you have a piece of material that you want to do that maybe you don't have the independent financer for, or it's just outside their budget range, and they can't really afford to finance a film that size. Then maybe you start looking at pairing with other production companies that are maybe a little further along than you. Maybe you look at pairing with an actor who has a production company who maybe wants to develop the content with you. They may have a friend. They may read your script and go, "Oh my gosh, I can't do this, but you should get Matt Damon, or you should get Halle Berry, or whoever." So you just, how do you know until you ask? I think asking is the biggest thing of all. Asking for money, which is always difficult. Asking about sales, which is always really difficult. Asking agents and managers and actors is always difficult. So the asking is the hard part, but you never know what's going to happen. So why not at least put it out there? Because I think you have to be prepared for the no's. You have to be prepared for the Hollywood no, which is, oh, sure, we'll take a look at that. And then you never hear from anybody again. You have to be prepared for the, sorry, it's not really for us, come back to us when you have an actor, whatever it is. You have to kind of be prepared for that, but understand that it's just so many no's before you get to yes. So you just have to be persistent. You have to be a little bit not pushy, but like, you just kind of have to go for it and just do the best you can, kind of navigating, all of that craziness, because it does get kind of nuts.
It does. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you, Dawn, for just being in it. For those of you listening, every time I reach out to Dawn, she is just, as you can tell just from listening to this interview, she is wheeling and dealing. She is asking for favors, asking for money, asking for actors. She is in it. So I just want to acknowledge you for just going for it, because honestly, coming from a small short film that you did that got into Cannes Film Festival, which is amazing, to now looking at budgets that are 10 million, 80 million. This is just such a huge leap. So I just want to acknowledge you for just having the courage to freaking go for it. It's so inspiring.
Well, we'll see how things play out, but it's scary. It's kind of a scary world, but I think if you take it one step at a time, it becomes less overwhelming. You just have to say, okay, I've got this list. I'm going to tackle this list today. I'm going to get through this, and just take it one step at a time. Don't let it get overwhelming. If you compartmentalize it a little bit, just don't let it get bigger than you are.
Hmm.
Because when you start doing that, that's when films don't get made. That's when people shut down, or they give up, or they don't think. I think my biggest thing was getting out of my own way, because I kept saying, well, who am I? Why do I deserve to make this? And who am I to ask this person for all this money? But you have to look at it as, you're not asking them for a favor. You're doing business with this person. You're trying to make them more money. You're trying to, I mean, we don't set out to make films that aren't successful, right?
Right.
We set out to make films that are going to blow the roof off the box office. We set off to make films that are going to get Oscar nominations and Golden Globes and BAFTAs and stuff. So, we don't set off to make things that aren't going to be great. We set out to make films that are going to be visionary and that are going to be exciting and inspiring and are going to make money. So that's how we have to sell it. That's how we have to pitch it to our investors, because, in the honest world of it, that's what our goal is. That is what we're trying to do, and that's how we see it unfolding. We also have to be realistic. We also have to look at the real side of things, and the tough side of things, but don't let the realistic part overtake the enthusiastic, inspirational part of it away. You know what I mean?
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that. And with that, my friends, we are out. Oh my gosh, Dawn, that was amazing. And I already know I'm going to have you back. Let's wait a few months. I'm going to see what goes on with your projects. I'm just so excited for you, so rooting for you. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And thank you, Indie Film Tribe, for hanging out with Dawn and I. Until next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.